All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to our webinar, Business Etiquette and Networking, presented by Darren E. Grahame of Northwestern Mutual. Before I introduce today's presenter, I'd like to go over how this webinar will work. First of all, you should be able to see the presentation on your computer screen. You'll also be able to hear the presentation through your audio system. Please feel free to ask questions by typing them in on the side panel. We will be monitoring your questions and will answer them at the end of the webinar. Any questions not answered in today's webinar will be addressed after the webinar is completed if we run out of time. Excuse me. And now I'd like to introduce today's topic and speaker. Darren Grahame has been the Development Officer with Northwestern Mutual in Morristown since May of 2016 and has been with the company since 2009. Prior to working in Morristown, Darren was the Development Officer in Memphis, Tennessee. As Development Officer, his role is to ensure achievement of all agency development targets, including all aspects of horizontal growth for the entire network office territory. Darren is also a certified coach and a certified master trainer. Darren also ran the internship program for 4 years as the college unit director, achieving the Conversion Master Award 2 times and the Conversion Leader Award 1 time. As a financial representative in Syracuse, New York for 5 years, he achieved Pacesetter First 40 and Second 60, and routinely sold over 100 policies a year. He takes continuing education very seriously and has achieved 8 professional designations in his first 5 years in the business. Mr. Grahame received his BS in Business Management from Binghamton University in 2006. He currently resides in Bedminster, New Jersey, with his wife Bridget and 16-month-old son Jameson. Darren is an avid sports fan and enjoys going to Syracuse and Yankees games often. So now I would like to introduce our presenter, Darren Grahame, presenting Business Etiquette and Networking.
Thank you so much. Hopefully everybody can hear me. I'm so glad to have this opportunity and glad that you're all here. I thought it might be good real quick to show you this. So this is that little guy, my 16-month-old son. He's like my whole world right now. So this is his first experience in a hammock, and he really, really enjoyed it, as you might expect, as we probably all would enjoy a hammock at this point.
Very cute.
In front of you is a thank you. I've got 2 parts to this webinar: business etiquette and networking, as we stated. And I was gonna, if it's okay with everybody, I was gonna working, but I'll definitely spend some time on the business etiquette. So please feel free, as was encouraged, to ask questions, and I'm happy to kind of field those as we go. So let's dive in. As far as business etiquette is concerned, I have a couple of agenda items that we'll cover there. So one is making a strong first impression. We'll talk a little bit about business meals and etiquette, proper etiquette around that, and then personal and electronic communication, as that's becoming more and more prevalent over time. So with that said, let's talk a little bit about first impressions. So those first few seconds are so critical, right? Like, people are sizing us up in just that, first 30 to 60 seconds. I've heard so many different statistics, but I've heard people say that within 45 seconds, they're deciding if they want to do business with you, or they're deciding if they like you or not. And I've heard different time frames and different stats, but either way, I think we can all agree that you have a very short amount of time to make a strong first impression. And so I'll give you some thoughts or ideas around that. One, I do think it's really important that you look the part. So know the people that you're going to be in front of or be around, and dress accordingly. So you can't see me, but I'm in a suit and tie today. So if I was in front of a bunch of Wall Street folks, that'd be very appropriate. If I was at a farmer's convention, I may stick out like a sore thumb. So I think in some cases it's okay to dress down if that's the audience that you're in front of, and in other cases that might be poor taste. So just do the research and be aware, and make sure they fit you. Right? It may sound silly, but sometimes we wear clothes that are too baggy or maybe too tight. And so people notice those kinds of things. I was told, now this is coming, this is for the gentlemen on the webinar, but for guys, I know that one of the first things they notice is your belt and your shoes. So I was always told, have a strong belt and strong pair of shoes, even if you don't have the budget to have a bunch of really nice suits. And for ladies, that probably applies too. But as a guy, I know that's resonated with other guys that I've talked to. And so making sure that they fit you and fit the environment is important. Double check the accessories, right? We talked a little bit about that, but those count too. And then also be well groomed. Again, probably more common sense, but sometimes people can look at that as sloppy, that you don't care, that you're disorganized, and that may not be true, but if you're not well groomed, that might be the impression that they get. So those first few seconds really, really do count. In addition to that, the handshake is part of that, right? And so I always tell people, make sure you make strong eye contact and you have a solid handshake. You know, as it says here, that's really your signature and an act of respect. And so here's some do's and don'ts around that initial handshake. Don't do the dead fish handshake, right? Where like you kind of extend your hand, but there's no oomph to it. Make sure that you have a strong grip, but don't be the bone crusher either, right? Like there's a middle ground there. And then on the do side, 2 or 3 firm pumps and you're done. Don't do the Donald Trump, right? I don't care what side of the political piece you're on, but you know, we don't need it to be 17 pumps, right? 2 or 3 firm pumps and then you move on. And whether it's a man or a woman that you're shaking hands with, you want to do it the same way. I think it could be taken the wrong way if your handshake differs depending on the gender, right? So it's not the dead fish, not the bone crusher, but a solid shake in between can go a long way and certainly can set the right tone. So let me stop there. Any questions on that so far?
No questions are coming in yet, but feel free, anyone, to type them in, and then I'll read them over to Darren.
Perfect. And I might stop from time to time if that's okay, because I know sometimes when you just talk without any gaps, that can be difficult to listen to. So please feel free to jump in. I'm happy to do that. Let's talk about the business meal. I don't know about anybody else, but sometimes when I see this, I wish it was labeled. And so if you're on top of this, then you're a step ahead of me. But a lot of times I get confused and whose wine glass is this, whose water glass is this, et cetera. And so I won't spend too much time on this, but maybe take a snapshot of it. This is the proper structure of a business meal. And so you want to make sure you're not taking somebody else's water glass or bread or butter plate. So I do think this is important. In addition to that, some do's and don'ts. Make sure you place your napkin in your lap. I tend to do it right away as soon as I get there, even if nothing's been served yet, just so I don't forget. And make sure you show up prepared, right? So what do I mean by that? Know who's going to be there, know who's going to be at the table if you can. You know, if it's like a general networking event and the table is random seating, at least know who's going to be at the event in general and who you might want to sit with. Some research can go a long way. I'm a part of the Morris County Chamber, and they do a really good job at events of sending out the list of attendees ahead of time. And so I would encourage, if you have an opportunity like that, to peruse the attendees. Are there people on there that you really want to make sure you meet? And are there people at the event that can help make that introduction? And so maybe you can sit next to them on accident, but a purposeful accident, if you will. And then keep in mind your host when you order. So again, some of this may be common sense, but I've gone to events before that were paid for. And I've seen people go there and they order the lobster and the steak and they order a bunch of stuff. And yeah, it's paid for, but I would follow the lead of the host, right? So if you're not sure whether drinking is appropriate or not, see what the host does. And I would tend to mimic them. And same thing from a food order. Now, if you have to be the first one to go, then there's nothing wrong with being conservative. And then if you have to flag the waiter or waitress down again to add to it, that's probably not a bad thing. But if you're first to go and you do this grandiose order and no one else does it, that might not feel great. And again, may seem silly, but refrain from doing anything at the table. It should be done in the bathroom. Like I think about blowing your nose. It's one of my dad's favorite tactics at the dinner table and grosses my mom out. And so everybody might be a little bit different when it comes to that kind of stuff. Some don'ts. Don't forget about basic table manners, right? Don't order food that make you look bad. We kind of talked about that. Talking on your phone, right? That's obviously more of an issue. I'd even say texting. I learned this probably 10 years ago. I was at a meal and I just happened to be on my phone. I was texting a little bit, and I found out later through a colleague of mine that it gave a very poor impression. That the host of the event just thought I was disinterested. They took it as disrespectful or rude, and I was very engaged. My wife needed something, I was texting her. So some advice on that would be, if you really do need to use the phone, just get up and walk out, go excuse yourself, go to the bathroom, even if it's to text. And then I try to keep my phone on silent and in my pocket unless it's needed. And this is a good one. I had not thought about this previously, but how many of us have sat down at a business meal and we're starving? And so like the bread comes out and we're diving in and it looks like we haven't had a meal in 7 days, right? So maybe having a light snack ahead of time so that you're not like chomping at the bit. If the meal takes a little bit longer to get food, you're not sitting there with your stomach gargling. So unless you have any questions on the business meal, I thought it'd be cool to talk about some conversation starters, some small talk assistants. And so I would think most of this is common sense, but I never like to assume. These are all very appropriate topics to discuss or start a conversation. I'm a huge sports person, as you heard earlier, and so that's really easy for me. If somebody's a sports person, that makes my life a little bit easier, but you've got plenty of things that would be appropriate. Here are some things that I would encourage you to stay away from. Salary, death, politics, religion, sex, health, weight, diets, anything that might be too personal or something that people would be very opinionated about may not be a good idea. And I would also encourage you, again, common sense, but not to curse, make negative comments, or to be too casual. Again, follow the lead of the host, right? I do this a lot, even in just non-business meals, just regular meetings. If somebody is very proper and doesn't use any slang, then I want to make sure to follow suit. But sometimes they do like to be a little bit more casual and use a little bit more slang. And if that's the case, it could make them more comfortable if I follow suit there. So when in doubt, follow the lead of the host. We have any thoughts or questions there so far?
No, nothing coming in yet, but that's okay.
I wouldn't expect a ton. This is definitely more common sense.
Yes.
Let's talk a little bit about email etiquette. So would encourage you to keep it formal, use a meaningful subject line and an appropriate greeting or sign off. And I'll give you some examples in a second. This second one is the most important. Proper spelling, grammar, and punctuation. People judge an email and even the person sending the email based on these things. And I can't tell you how many times I've had somebody that is very intelligent, extremely reliable, that messed up on some of these things. And if I didn't know them, I might think otherwise. And so I'm very, very mindful of this personally. I make sure when I send emails that I double and sometimes triple check. I reread them. Spell check may not catch certain things. And so I always want to make sure that email's tough too, right? Some things can be taken the wrong way when it's in print. So I try to read it aloud even to see how might I take it if I was on the other side. I'm a big smiley face person. So if I'm saying something that I want to make sure they know I mean in a really positive light, I might put that in there. Because again, in print, it is hard to get your message across. Now, that would be more of like an internal email. Like if you're sending an email to a business opportunity, you might not want to have smiley faces all over it. So, use your judgment there. But when in doubt, as far as how the tone might be taken, consider rewording it or even putting something in there so they understand that you're saying it in a positive tone. Would not advise jokes, sarcasm, cat videos, etc., especially depending on who you're sending it to. We talked about proofreading it. Has anybody had that clicking send immediate regret? Like you send it and then you scurry to the sent box to make sure that it was worded the way you want. If you ever have felt that way, because I know I have, just make sure you reread it 2 or 3 times before you hit send, just to make sure. And I encourage you not to treat it like a text message. Email is so prevalent now that it's easy to be informal in an email. But again, people, it's another example of first impressions. People can be very judgy based on your proper spelling, grammar, etc. So here's an example. In this example, let's say you're interviewing for another opportunity and you got a voicemail from their HR department that they want to confirm with you, or they'd ask you to confirm with the interviewer that the time will work. So they want you to email Alex, who's going to be conducting the interview, to confirm that 10 a.m. works. So I'm going to give you 3 examples of what that email might look like. I would not do this, right? This would be very similar to a text message. And again, I hope this is common sense for most of you, but this is an extreme example, right? But even if it was close to this, you know, I like to start my greetings with good morning or good afternoon. You know, even hey man or hey Sally may not be taken the right way. You know, I would definitely avoid the 1-letter words and numbers in here like this. But this one may not be as common sense. So Alex, I'm very much looking forward to meeting with you tomorrow at 10 a.m. I think my qualifications, blah, 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 blah. I also have this, I have that. Too long, right? If I'm simply confirming an email time, we have to be conscious of the other person's time, and this may be too long. This is not your opportunity in this example to sell yourself. That's what the interview is going to be for. So here would be a great example. Ms. Peterson, I received a call today from Mr. Harrison, Human Resources, want to confirm my interview for 10 a.m. So you're letting them know this is why I'm emailing you. I was asked to do this. I look forward to meeting with you at that time. So you're basically letting them know, yeah, that works. So again, I hope that a lot of that is common sense as well, but you never know. And in today's day and age, how much emails are sent and received. It's worth that little extra effort and extra thought. So,
Darren, I'm sorry,
yeah.
this is Sharon. Someone just wrote, I just want to ask this, that they're talking, someone's referencing the smiley faces.
Yeah.
Would you really do that in a business email or something?
So it depends on the context, right? I wouldn't in this email, right? So that's like a first impression thing. I'm emailing this person to confirm. I'm thinking internally when I'm sending internal emails to other folks in the office, if I'm making a request of someone, I think sometimes it can be taken the wrong way as like a demand. And so I do use that a lot in more informal emails, more internal emails, to let them know like, hey, I'm saying this with a smile on my face. So great question. I think it really does depend on the context. I wouldn't send in an email like this. You know, if I'm conducting business with another company, I probably wouldn't.
So like internally, you're asking someone to do something kind of like, hey, could you make sure you get this done? Smile face, like that would be appropriate.
Yeah, I'd really appreciate it if you could help me with this. So I do use it. Now I'm a smiley face guy. Not everybody is. I guess, and it might be me being overly concerned, but I'm always so worried that somebody's going to read it and take it the wrong way. And so I found that it helps. But I think the context is very, very important. You know, I wouldn't do it in my first email to someone. I wouldn't do it in my communication in a business dealing or in a first impression type of email.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else?
That's good for now. Thank you.
Yep. So as we start to wrap up the business etiquette portion, here are some takeaways. I'd encourage you to strike up a conversation with somebody new and practice some of those conversation starters we talked about. And we'll get into this more as we talk more about the networking portion. If you don't have a business card, I'd encourage you to get one. There's so many different carriers now that do it. So it's not that expensive to get a business card done. But I'm seeing more and more students do it while they're in school at career fairs, and as they're looking to get jobs. That it's a cool way to get their contact information out and also set a first impression. To me, it comes across as very professional. So I never go anywhere without business cards. So I'll tell you a quick story about that. At my wedding almost 7 years ago, I was on the dance floor, and I was an advisor at that time. And so I was always told, always have business cards, you never know. And somebody said to me as I'm passing by them on the dance floor, hey, I'd love to talk to you at some point. I'd love a card from you. Not now, obviously, but I'd love a card from you. And I reached into my tux, and in my wallet, I always keep at least 2 business cards and give them a card right there. They were not expecting that. But you know what? I might lose that opportunity. And so I always have at least 2 on me. I have a bunch in the car. And then I have in my work binder or folder, I have the rest of them. So between my wallet, my car, and my binder, I've always got business cards at the ready. Practice the proper etiquette at the next business meal, and making sure in your email that you're double and triple checking the message and you're using proper etiquette there. So before we transition into the networking portion, which will be the bulk of our webinar today, any other questions or thoughts there before I move on?
No, I'm actually, a few people have missed the beginning, so I just want to let everybody know, if you did miss the beginning, that we are recording this and we'll put it on our YouTube channel and you'll be getting an email later. I just want to let everybody know that. So thank you. Okay, thanks, Darren.
Yep. So no pressure, Darren. Everything you say is recorded.
Exactly.
So let's go into the networking portion. This is something I'm very, very passionate about. But I also be very transparent with you. I am not a great worker of the room. So one of the tips before I forget to give it is, if I'm going to a networking event, and know thyself, right? I'm not somebody that's going to work the room naturally. That's not something I'm comfortable doing. I'm going to bring somebody that is comfortable doing that. So my wife is fantastic at starting conversations, meeting people for the first time, working in the room in a networking setting. The recruiters in our office are recruiters for that reason. They're great at this. So when I go to an event where I want to meet people, I'm going to bring people that is a strength for them. If I bring a buddy who's feeling the same way I am, we'll end up in the corner talking to each other the whole time and won't meet anybody new. So this is something I'm very passionate about, but that I have to work very hard at because it doesn't come natural to me. So to give you some context to this portion, a lot of these ideas are coming from things that work for me, someone that this isn't very natural to. So here are the things that I wanted to cover in this portion. Social networking, how we can do that a little bit better, or how to maximize that opportunity. Discovering and leveraging your own personal network, and then some basics around networking events themselves. And I think you'll see that the context in this portion is if I were networking to find a career opportunity. But these tips will apply whether that's your situation or not. So what I mean by that is, if you're sitting there saying, hey, I love my career, I'm not looking at other opportunities, but I'm networking for other reasons, most, if not all of these will still apply. But you'll notice that context woven in here and there. So if you were looking at a job opportunity, or you wanted a job opportunity, what are the 3 places that people typically start using? Social network, a job board, classified ad. That classified ad is becoming less and less, right? It's more online than it is a print ad or print advertising. When I was looking for jobs for the very first time, there was a lot in the newspaper. Less and less companies are going that route. But this I thought was interesting, how jobs are found these days. And this is based on a study done in 2014. So these numbers may have changed slightly, but I bet you it's more in favor of the online stuff, even more so than it was a couple of years ago. You'll notice the last one is college university connections. So this very webinar, making connections through your alumni network and through the university. Career fairs, right, through a recruiter. But look at the top 2. Your online social network and an online job board. So I know at Northwestern Mutual, we use Indeed quite a bit. We use ZipRecruiter quite a bit. So we're posting opportunities on those sites, but we're also searching those sites. And then LinkedIn is a big one for us too. But let's talk a little bit about that social networking, because this is like the thing of the future, right? Everybody's doing this. And I'm going to date myself a little bit. I'm 34 years old. So Facebook came out when I was in college. So when I was first getting my job, my very first job in high school, this wasn't a thing. And the people that are graduating now, this is everything. And so I want to spend a little bit of time on the proper way to brand yourself through social networking, social media. So number 1, 93% of recruiters are likely to look at your social profiles. And I'll give you some examples of that as we go throughout here, but they're looking at it. I know that some of our recruiters, if they're looking at a candidate and they want to know more about him, they'll see if they can find a social media profile. And you can tell a lot about a person from that. So that's probably not new advice, right? Hopefully you've heard that. But I'll give you some advice on how to improve your brand. The other stat I thought was interesting is that 42% have reconsidered a candidate because of something in that profile. So even though this might be something we all know, almost half of the candidates out there don't get the hint. So let me give you some tips around that. Number one, make sure you're using the right sites to build your brand. We'll talk a little bit more about that. And put yourself in their shoes, whether this is a potential client, a potential networking partner, a potential candidate, or a potential employer. Put yourself in that person's shoes, and am I providing them with the view of myself that I want them to see? And is that making a good first impression? So we talked about first impression in those first 30 to 60 seconds of meeting someone, but in today's world, you may have already made that first impression, whether you realize that or not, through social media and social profiles. So think about it from this standpoint. Am I posting things that will help me or burn me? My father-in-law said this for years now. Let me give you some context. My father-in-law does not have any social media profiles at all. He's not a fan. He's old school. But he tells his kids, don't post anything on Facebook or Twitter or whatever that you wouldn't want on the front page of the New York Times. And I thought that was really, really interesting because, I see this a lot in sports, or I see this a lot with celebrities, or even, political candidates. They find stuff from 7 years ago that you posted. Once you put it in the internet, it is out there forever. And a lot of times people post something and delete it, but if it was even out there for a few minutes, somebody may have done a snapshot of it and they've got it forever. So I thought that was really, really good advice, and I'll share it with you. Don't put anything on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, etc., that you wouldn't want showing up on the front page of the New York Times. So safety first, right? Check your security and privacy settings, and we'll spend a little bit of time on this. Facebook lets you pretty much restrict anything you want, which is great. And LinkedIn and Twitter are a little bit more open there, but there are some ways to protect yourself. So I do want to get into that. With Facebook, keep it professional, but inviting. So Facebook is more social than LinkedIn, say. But again, anything that you put on there, you've got to assume people may be able to see, unless you protect yourself through the privacy settings. Consider who you want following you, who's friends with you. People are going to judge you by the company you keep. I heard somewhere that you are the average of your 10 closest friends. So it always makes me think, like, who are my 10 closest friends? Is that a good thing or a bad thing? And if somebody doesn't know you, but they see who is closest to you on social media, they're going to assume that you're very similar, whether that's good or bad. Make sure you know the intentions of people that want to connect with you. I think about this with LinkedIn specifically. So I've got somebody right now that sent me a request that is a recruiter of financial services. They are looking for people in the financial services world. That's their job. So I know if I connect with that person, they're going to try to recruit me out of Northwestern Mutual. I don't want to do that. I love Northwestern Mutual. I have no intention of connecting with the person. I don't know who they are. They must have randomly found me. And I'm not naive to think that they just want to connect with me for the sake of it. Like, think about their role. That's why they want to connect with you. If you're okay with that, so be it. But in my case, I didn't want to be reached out by that person. And then think about, before you post something, would you care if your coach saw it, a future employer saw it? What would your mom say if she saw it? Like, think about that before it goes up. So with Facebook, you can, when you make a post, you can determine who sees it, right? And so you may or may not have noticed this. I think the default is all your friends, but you can make it public. You can make it just you. You can customize who sees it, who doesn't. So I would pay closer attention to that as you're posting things. And then through their privacy settings and tools, there's a lot you can do there, right? You can control who sees what. And so we'll get to this a little bit later, but I've got some people that I'm Facebook friends with that are just not the most intelligent people on the face of the earth. I'm saying that as nicely as I can. And so, I've known them, I've met them at some point in my life. I didn't deny their friend request, but I also don't trust everybody that I'm Facebook friends with to post things on my wall that are appropriate. So probably 7 or 8 years ago, you can't post on my wall. So if you find me on Facebook, the only way you can communicate with me on Facebook is to send me a private message. So I now have total control over what other people see on my wall, because the only thing that's on my wall is stuff that I post. Now they can comment on things that I've posted, but I then have control. I can delete those things. I can block people, right? I still have control over even that part. But believe it or not, I had to block access to posting on my wall because some people don't post the most appropriate things. Let's transition to LinkedIn. Great tool for networking. And I think this is what most people envision when you think about social media networking. I use it a ton personally. We use it as an office. I'm new to this area. I'm originally from upstate New York, and I've been in the Morristown, New Jersey area for about a year. So LinkedIn has been a tremendous resource for me to get better connected in the local community. And so you don't have to have years and years of experience to create a pretty good profile. If you are looking for an opportunity, put that in there. You can put things in there like seeking new opportunities or recently graduated, whatever the case is. You can make it known to the world that, hey, I'm looking for opportunities through LinkedIn. Take advantage of their profile options, like experiences. You can highlight things that you've done that are important to you. So if you go onto my LinkedIn, and I invite all of you to do that, just make sure you put the E on the end of Grahame. It's Grahame like the cracker with an E. I'm probably one of the few on there with that spelling. And feel free to peruse through there. I've got things on there like my Series 7 registration is on there. The designations that I hold are on there. It was mentioned that I have a coaching certification and a training certification. Those things are on there. So, there's certain things that I want people to know. You can highlight skills that you've achieved or that you have, and then endorsements from others. So take advantage of all those things. That might take a little bit more work, a little bit more time, but totally worth it. And I'd encourage you to keep LinkedIn updated. So as a general rule of thumb, I would say at least once a quarter. Once a month might be overkill. I certainly wouldn't do it more than that. But once a quarter sounds about right to me as a best practice. Just go in there and make sure your profile is as updated as you like it to be. I can't tell you how many times somebody has on there a job that they don't work for anymore, right? They just haven't looked at it in a while, or maybe they're in a different role now. So if you just look at it every few months, that certainly would help. So here's an example of one. It gives you their current role, their previous role, their education, so on and so forth. Twitter. This is, I don't know how much we use this in a professional setting, more so for promotion than anything else. Like we have an office Twitter account, and it's more so, hey, we just did this with our internship program, or hey, we just did this volunteer event for Habitat for Humanity. Whatever the case is, we like to share those things. But it's much more sharing what you're doing when you're doing it, as opposed to posting professional type things. And then I'm sure you guys are familiar with the hashtags. It's easy to track certain trends. So here's an example of one of our office's Twitter accounts. And so they're putting out there like, hey, January is Financial Wellness Month, or hey, we did this event as an office. And that might be a cool way to brand yourself or your company. But I look at it more as promotional or branding than I do necessarily networking. Google. I'd encourage everyone to Google themselves and see what comes up. So if I were to do this, I would put in Darren Grahame, Morristown, New Jersey, or just Darren Grahame and see what comes up. If you have a LinkedIn account, that's usually one of the first things that will pop up. But see what comes up. And is everything that comes up something that you would be happy with? I did this for a colleague of mine when I lived in Memphis, Tennessee, just because I got this advice. And so I did it. And a couple of things popped up from when she was in college. And so I let her know. I was like, hey, is this something you want out there? Like, if you do, great, but you may not. And I had a feeling she may not want that video. I don't know what it was from college, but it wasn't the most flattering example, especially knowing this person. So see what comes up. And I'd go at least 2 pages deep, right? So depending on how common your name is, like my name is common enough that it's that first page, page and a half is all me. I encourage you to Google me, see what comes up. But you'll find articles that I've been written up in or articles that I've written. You'll see a LinkedIn account. There's everything that's on there is I'm okay with. And if I wasn't, then I would work to change that. And there are companies that can help you with this. You can hire somebody to control the brand or the message, but people are Googling everything. And so I would be very, very conscious of what's out there. So,
Darren, I'm sorry.
Yes.
There's a question here that I wanted to ask right now, if that's okay. You went over the social networks and things like that, but this person wants to know, how do you know what, obviously Twitter and Facebook are legitimate, but what about online job boards? How do you know which ones are legitimate? Or, I know you mentioned Indeed and
ZipRecruiter was the other, but that's a really good question. My personal advice, and this is, I hope I'm not offending anybody, but I would stay away from Craigslist. I think you can get some shady stuff on there. Whether I'm looking for opportunities or I'm posting opportunities, I probably personally would stay away from there. Indeed is like the new Monster. Monster probably 5-10 years ago was the one. But I think Indeed is now the main one, I think the most reputable. ZipRecruiter is one of these sites that collects a bunch, and you can post to one site, and it posts to numerous job sites at once. And so to the best of my knowledge, those are all reputable opportunities. So I don't know if I can answer that question as well as the person asked would like me to, but maybe research ZipRecruiter and see what sites are associated with them. That's probably a good sign. Okay. We've had a lot of success with that. And when in doubt, do some research, right? Again, Google it. Google that site and see what comes up. There's almost always going to be bad and good reviews of everything.
Okay. And can I ask 2 more questions that are going back a little bit that 2 people asked, and it's about business cards. One person wanted to know what should be on your business card, and another person who is evidently a student wants to know how would students use a business card, and what company like that would you say you were from, or how would you put that on your business card?
Yeah, so let me answer the student part first. Okay. I would put in there my name, the year I graduate, the school I go to, and my major. Now, you have to be very, very careful. There's trademarks and stuff, so you can't put a big WP on there. I've got permission to do this on the PowerPoint, but you've got to be careful with how you use it there. But there's nothing wrong with saying, 2018 William Patterson graduate, or expected graduation at William Patterson 2018. Okay. So I would at least have expected date of graduation, major, school, full name. But I've seen people get more creative than that. I would at very least do that. Would you and I got to tell you, I'm seeing more and more people do it. Mm-hmm. It is still pretty rare, but I'm always impressed when I have a student do that because I don't expect it, right? I think it separates them in a good way. Okay. And then I forgot the first part. I apologize.
Oh, the first question was basically what should be on your business card.
So if I am employed currently, then I would put on there my name, my title, the company I work for, and then the contact information, right? So same for the student. I would make sure you've got your cell phone number or email on there. And I wouldn't use a personal email if it's like a funky saying or something. Like I would use your school email because it's probably more professional. Like don't have it be hotstuff@gmail.com, right? Like use common sense there. You're branding yourself, right? And once it's on print, it's forever on print, just like this webinar. So I would want to definitely have best contact information, name, title, company. And if I am trying to brand myself for opportunities, then I would do a lot of the same things that you would put on a LinkedIn, actively seeking opportunities in finance. 2016 William Patterson graduate, some of the stats you heard about me, BS in business management, actively searching marketing opportunities, and then my contact info.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. Anything else there?
Nope, that's good.
So as we start to wrap up the social networking piece, make sure that you update and maintain a LinkedIn profile. If you don't have a LinkedIn profile, for everyone in this webinar, I would make that your first to-do item after this webinar. So maybe during tomorrow's lunch. Customize your privacy options, and don't overdo like the joining groups. There's a few groups that I've joined through LinkedIn or Facebook, but again, people can see that too, depending on your privacy settings. So you may not want to be a part of groups that you don't want other people to be aware of. Don't let your friends embarrass you, right? Like if you have to, block them or eliminate their ability to post on your wall. And then I always like this test. What would my boss say, or what would my mom say if he or she saw this? And go back to my father-in-law's advice. If you wouldn't want whatever I'm about to post on the front page of the newspaper, I probably shouldn't post it. So before we get into just general networking and networking events, any questions on social media, social networking?
No, nothing's coming in right now.
Great. So your personal network is a great place to start. I was having this conversation with somebody recently about how many times somebody finds a job through a personal connection, right? Those job boards we mentioned, Indeed, ZipRecruiter, et cetera, those can work. LinkedIn is great, but it's who you know, not what you know. And so this is a really cool thing. If you can take a snippet of this, or if you can make your own version of this slide, taking some time to brainstorm, who are you connected to? And so whether you're looking for a job opportunity or you're looking to network for a specific business purpose, I always like to start here. Who do I already know? And here's some categories that can help. Not all of these will apply, but I think what you'll find as you do this is we categorize people in our mind, meaning if I think about one person, I typically think of 4 or 5 others that are somehow connected to that person. So if you said to me the word cousin, I think of my cousin Brian, and then his brother, so my other cousins, Mike and Steve. And then I start to think about my cousins on the other side of the family. And so we tend to do that, right? So if you think about one person in your alumni network, you may think of 3 or 4 others that fit in that same category. So this can act as a really neat brainstorming exercise. When I first moved here, I wanted to get better connected in the area. And really the only people that I knew here were the people that I was working with, or so I thought. But I had a real estate agent, and I joined the Y, and I was starting to go to the gym. And so there were people that I met and interacted with that when I really put some time to it, I could leverage to expand my personal network. Sorry for the sirens. So any thoughts or questions there?
No, that's okay. We're good. Thank you.
It can be really, really powerful depending on the context of how you want to use it. So if I'm sitting there saying, hey, I want a job opportunity, or hey, I want to get connected with more doctors, but I don't know any doctors. Well, who do I know that does know doctors? And I might go through this and say, who could be the connector to get me into that group? So let's talk about event networking, and we'll kind of wrap up with that, and then I'll give you some general takeaways before we wrap up. One is make a plan, have a goal and a message. So I told you, the Chamber of Commerce that I'm a part of, they like to send out a list of attendees before I go. So I always like to peruse that and see, okay, who on here do I already know? So I may not spend a ton of time chatting with them, but they may be connected to other people. Like I might then go on LinkedIn, see who those people I already know are connected to, and are they connected to other people on this list that I'm not, in the way that they might be able to help facilitate an introduction. So I've been known to maybe email that person and say, hey, I'd really like to get connected to Sally Jones. I see that all 3 of us are going to be at this event tomorrow, and I saw that you're connected to her on LinkedIn. Do you know her well? Would you be willing to facilitate an introduction tomorrow morning? that can be really, really powerful. Be as strategic as possible as opposed to just showing up and see what happens. The more prepared you are for that meeting, the more fruitful it tends to be. And then have an idea of what you want your message to be. So, you can call that an elevator pitch or an elevator speech, but you want to have a compelling way of getting your message across, whatever that happens to be, whatever your motive is. And so I would encourage you on that note to avoid questions that people go into autopilot answering. So great example. Hey, how are you? If I were to meet any of you and say, hey, how are you? You probably don't even think about your response. You ever have that like awkward interaction in the hallway at work or at school where you say, hey, how are you? And they say, hey, how are you? And it's like, you weren't even really thinking about what you say. I try as much as possible to say something interesting and authentic. So, if somebody asks me how I'm doing in the morning, I might say, I'm great, but I'm pretty tired. I can't wait for my coffee. How often, and that's very true, right? Very authentic. How often people not do that, right? How are you? Great. How are you? Great. And that was the end of it. And it seems very insincere. So at a networking event in particular, I would avoid that question, how are you? I would avoid the question, hey, are you from around here? Because they tend to go into autopilot answering that question. So what are some good questions? I might say something like, hey, what's the most interesting thing you're working on right now? Something that they would get passionate or excited to answer or talk about. Hey, do you have like a pet project that you've worked on in the last 3 months? What's the most challenging thing you're dealing with in your business right now? Those are questions they don't go into autopilot answering, that they really that are thought-provoking. And I think you'll get into a much more authentic and interesting conversation that way. Use the 10-minute rule for working the room, meaning don't spend any more than 10 minutes with any one person. And so the advice that I'll give you around this, again, this is not my thing, right? I'm not great at this. Left to my own devices, I'll stand in the corner of the room and talk to the one person I already know, right? So know thyself. I know that about myself. So I set out a very realistic goal when I'm in a setting like this. I don't want to work the room. I'm not great at that. My wife is, right? So when I could bring her and just ride her coattails, and she'll walk around the room and she has no problem approaching people and introducing herself, although I'm shy to do that. She'll do it and then introduce me. Oh, have you met my husband, Darren? And that's all I need. I just kind of need that intro. So I'll bring somebody like my wife that can help. If not, if I'm there alone, I'm in it by myself, then I'll make a very easy goal. I just want to meet 3 to 5 people. That's it. I don't need to meet everybody there. I want to meet 3 to 5 people and have an authentic conversation with them and learn something interesting about them and talk about something that they will remember we talked about. So again, I'm a sports guy, right? So one of the easiest things for me, if somebody happens to mention they're from Pittsburgh, then I might say, oh, are you a Steelers fan? And it almost doesn't matter if they are or not. If they say, no, but I'm a big Browns fan. Unlikely if they're from Pittsburgh, but you get my point. Hey, I'm a big Browns fan. I can talk about that because I love sports. That's something I'm passionate about. If they're not, or you're not a sports person, it doesn't have to be that. But the reason why I think this is important is I'm going to hopefully get their business card, which we'll talk about in a second. And if we talked about the Browns for 10 minutes, when I walk away from the conversation, I'm going to write Cleveland Browns on the card. And then if I follow up with that person, let's say I call them a few days later, I'm going to politely remind them, hey, this is Darren. We met the other day at the networking event. Remember we talked about the Browns for a few minutes? And I want to have that conversation be unique enough that I can say that and they will immediately remember who I am. Because they may have met more than 3 to 5 people, right? They may have met dozens of people. And I want to be able to stand out in a unique way. But this 10-minute rule is about getting to that in 10 minutes and then moving on. You don't want to spend 35 minutes with one person in a 45-minute meeting and you met 1 or 2 people. And so I'll give you some like escape routes. I'll give you some ways that if you're getting close to that number that you can get out politely. Listen more than you talk. People love talking about themselves, so let them, right? So a rule of thumb I use is I like to ask 3 questions about them before I talk about myself at all. Because if I can ask 3 questions about them, that usually gets them going. And then usually they'll start asking about me. One way that you can exit conversations gracefully, we'll talk about this a little bit later, but standing, like if there's a circle of people or a group of people that are talking, kind of standing in the peripheral not creepily, but like standing where somebody might notice you. And a lot of times they'll open up and invite you in and make it easy for you to kind of enter into that conversation. Oh, hi, how are you? What's your name? The easy exit is, hey, I'm going to grab a drink. I'm going to grab something to eat. Or, hey, I really enjoyed this conversation. Do you have a business card? I'd love to continue this some other time because I'd like to meet a few other people while I'm here. That is very polite. People understand that. So, hey, I've really enjoyed this conversation, but I also would like to talk to a few others while I'm here. Do you have a business card with you? I'd love to connect with you some other time. And when it comes to business cards, I want theirs more than I want them to have mine. Because I've found, first of all, I'm very controlling. So in full transparency, if I've got their card, then I'm in control of the follow-up, right? And one of the things I like to do is connect with them on LinkedIn and then send maybe an email follow-up or a phone call follow-up. But it's hard for me to do that if I don't have their business card. And sometimes people say, oh, hey, I'll follow up with you. Do you have a business card? And they don't. So at the very least, I want to exchange them. I'm not saying don't give your cards out, but the more important thing to me is that I get theirs. And always, always, always bring a pen with you. I've made that mistake before where I'm networking. I got that unique piece of information about them. I talked about the Cleveland Browns and I don't have a pen. So I don't write it down and I inevitably forget it. So I always carry a pen with me, especially in these settings, so I can make some notes on it afterwards. So let's get into the name game. People love hearing their name. And so it's important that you remember people's names. And I know that's hard. It's so hard, right? And some people say they're good with names, some aren't. This might be natural for others, but here are some tips around that. Make sure you pay attention to it. How often do we say, oh, what's your name? And then we don't pay attention to what they said, and like 3 seconds later, we forgot. So if you're going to introduce yourself, make sure you do pay attention, and then maybe repeat it. So what I like to do is, oh, your name is Michelle. Do you spell that with 1 L or 2? Because now I'm visualizing that name in my head. And you can associate it with another Michelle that you know, or a famous Michelle, so that in your mind, you can remember that person a little bit better. I'd encourage you to repeat their name in the conversation, but not too often, maybe 2 or 3 times in the conversation to help you remember it. And then so for some reason this works, but like if Michelle's wearing a red dress, I might think red dress Michelle, red dress Michelle. And for some reason that might stick later on, or the famous person or another Michelle that you know. Something that you can associate a connection to in your mind typically helps. We talked a little bit about entering a conversation gracefully. If you get there early, you can kind of scope the room and you'll actually meet more people early on, because when there's only a few folks there, it's easier to approach individuals. I like approaching a group of people. Again, I'm a little awkward with this. It's not natural for me. So if there's a group of 3 or 4 people that are huddling around each other, I'll kind of stand just outside the circle, and a lot of times they'll welcome me in. And then maybe an approach could be, oh, I think I know you from this. That might help as well. Exiting. We talked a little bit about this, but this is a great way, is to introduce 2 different people. So I read an article about this recently, but if you had a really good conversation with someone about the Cleveland Browns, and you know somebody else in that group that's also a football fan, you can say, hey, Bob, meet Bill. Bob's a really big Browns fan. Bill, I know you're a Steelers fan, so there might be a little tenuous relationship there, but I thought you guys might want to meet. And then I can introduce themselves and step away. So that can be really cool. Excuse me while I'm going to grab a drink, or excuse me, I think I'm going to grab something to eat. Or just explain that you want to meet more other people, like I said before. Hey, I'd like to meet some other folks, but I really enjoyed this conversation. Do you have a business card? And then I love the follow-up, either email or phone call, depending on the context of the conversation. But at the very least, I like doing a LinkedIn connection. So if I got their business card, that's fairly easy to do. And a simple follow-up might be, hey, if you were to send an email, I really enjoyed our conversation about the Cleveland Browns last week. By the way, I'm not a Browns fan, just what I went with, so I'm going to keep going with it. Hey, I really appreciate our conversation around that. I'd love to connect for coffee at some point if you're open to it. It was great meeting you last Friday, or whatever. So here's some takeaways as we start to wrap up. Discover your own personal network. Think about who you already know that might be a connector for you. Work on your elevator speech, work on your message. When somebody says, how are things at work? Don't just say busy. That's what everybody says. Can you give them some kind of unique information? Google yourself and make sure it's what you would want people to see. And practice that entering and exiting conversations so that it's not awkward and that you're polite. So questions do you have on that? I have 2 more slides, but what questions do you have on that?
Why don't you do the 2 more slides, because we only have 5 more minutes. So, and people are having to leave a little bit. So
perfect. So let's just talk a little bit about Northwestern Mutual. We actually are interviewing currently for opportunities in financial services for a financial advisor role. And so some of you may or may not be familiar with Northwestern, but we help people plan for their financial security and have done so for the last 160 years. In fact, March 2nd was our 160th anniversary. And our financial representatives and advisors are helping our clients protect and grow their wealth. So both through insurance and investment solutions. And then you've got some stats there. We're ranked number 100 on the Fortune 500 list. We're ranked number 2 by Selling Power magazine as one of the 50 best companies to sell for. And we're ranked 6th on the Fortune World's Most Admired Companies list in our category. So I'd encourage you to Google Northwestern if you want to learn more. You can feel free to reach out to me. I appreciate everybody's time. This was a great opportunity, and I'm happy to follow up with anybody that wants to talk more about it. But if there's any questions, I'm happy to entertain them.
thank you, Darren. We actually had a few people who were under their desk listening because they're at work and had to leave and go back from their lunch hours. So if you do have any quick questions, we have 3 minutes. But other than that, if you are interested in a career with Northwestern, definitely go here. And thank you for all the information. This has been recorded, this webinar, so we'll be putting it on our YouTube channel. I have sent a few of you the link, but it's not up yet. It'll be up this afternoon as soon as I download it. And once it's up, I'll be sending everyone who's here the link to the YouTube channel. And Darren, if it's okay, could we send a PDF of your presentation to some people?
Yeah, feel free to do so. And I also encourage you to send my email.
Okay.
This is a great source if you want to learn more about Northwestern Mutual careers, but it will not get you directly to me. So if you have questions or you're interested in learning more about potential careers at Northwestern, please feel free to contact me directly and I'm happy to help.
Okay. So I don't see any other questions coming in, but just to reiterate, we're going to send you a PDF of this presentation. It will be up on our YouTube channel. And I'll also send you all Darren's email in case you do have any further questions for him that you're not thinking of right now or you have to run. And other than that, thank you, Darren, for presenting this. It was great information. And thank you all for attending. And I hope you enjoyed it. And again, thank you, Darren.
Thank you for having me. It was great. Have a great day, everyone.
Bye, everybody.